And I can't hide, 'cause growing pains are keeping me up at night.
Hey everyone, before we start this week's episode, I have a few things I want to share very quickly. I will be speaking at 2 conferences plus a webinar in the next 3 weeks. And so I'd love for all of you to come and support me. But not only that, listen to the other amazing speakers and engage with the different things happening at these conferences and webinars. The first one is the Uplift Conference on November 4th at 9 a.m. EDT. I will be presenting there, and you will get a chance to ask me all of your questions. The registration will be in the link in the description, so check that out. The second one is the American College of Rheumatology Conference on Sunday, November 7th at 3:45 p.m. EDT. Just a note, all these conferences have a wide variety of speakers on different days, but I'm kind of just giving you the ones that I'll be there because I know you're a Take Advantage community, but you will literally get access to all the other speakers. So definitely buy your tickets. The third webinar is on November 10th, which is hosted by the International Association for the Study of Pain, and it will be the whole day, but the session that I will be speaking at is at 1 p.m. EDT, so check it out. Register down below using the description. There are 3 cool things happening in November, and I'm so excited to see all of you there and all of your support, and I'll be able to answer all of your questions, which will be amazing. Okay, so let's get to the episode. I don't want to bore you anymore with me talking, so let's get started.
The information that we share today is from our own personal experiences and does not constitute medical advice. We do not endorse any products or services. Any said products or services mentioned on this podcast may not be suitable for you or your condition. Please consult with your physician if you have medical questions as it may pertain to your condition.
Hi everyone, welcome back to this week's episode on Take a Paycheck. I'm thrilled to have Marissa Sangers joining us today. Marissa went to St. Lawrence College to study early childhood education and has since specialized in autism and behavioral sciences. She currently works as an educational assistant at the Thames Valley District School Board in London, Ontario. She is the mother of 2 wild girls, as she quotes, Charlotte, age 8, and Riley, age 7. Although she does not have a condition herself, she is the mother of a child who has a rheumatic disease, which in this case is her older daughter, Charlotte. So, hi Marissa, I'm really excited to have a chat with you today. Could you kind of give a little brief introduction about yourself and what Charlotte's condition is specifically?
Yeah, so like you said, I'm Marissa Sangers. I am just a busy mom who's also getting ready for back to school because I work in a school as well. Charlotte was diagnosed with juvenile arthritis when she was right before her 3rd birthday. But it was about a year before we even got her diagnosed.
Okay.
So it was quite the challenge to get somebody to actually figure out what was going on. And then once we were able to, then she was diagnosed with juvenile arthritis. And then since then has actually had it kind of tweaked a little bit to enthesitis related arthritis.
Wow. Okay. So what were the initial kind of symptoms that you saw that Charlotte was experiencing that kind of made you realize that you needed to see a doctor or a rheumatologist?
Yeah, so shortly after her 2nd birthday, she just had a giant toe. She wasn't like complaining about it, but her big toe on her left foot was just huge, and she was 2, so she couldn't really tell us what was going on, and we were trying to think like, did she stub it? Did she like break it and just didn't tell us what was happening? And we just noticed putting her in a bath. So after probably about a month or so of this giant toe and watching it, one night she just completely refused to walk. She was bawling her eyes out and screaming and just said, my toes ouchie, my toes ouchie. So I wasn't sure what was happening. So we took her to our local hospital and they did x-rays and they were like, there's nothing broken. So maybe she just stubbed it really bad.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't really want to accept that. Like I knew there was something else because it had been going on for a month, and then all of a sudden she couldn't walk. So the next day my husband and I packed up and went to the Children's Hospital in London. So it's about a 40-minute drive for us. And they knew it was something, but they weren't really sure what. So they, instead of just doing the standard x-rays and kind of giving up in a way, they continued to push more and did ultrasounds and could see some inflammation. So they forwarded us to a plastic surgeon. They thought
Okay.
that she had a vascular malformation. So they thought her veins were swollen and there was something going on with her veins. And so we got a referral to there, and multiple months went by and different tests and blood work and appointments. And after a while, finally, then they called us when we were thinking pretty much we were going to have surgery for our daughter. And he was like, "Oh, this isn't that. This is arthritis. I'm going to forward you to a rheumatologist." And both my husband and I were like, "What?" Like, she's 3. Like, you can't get arthritis when you're 3. You get arthritis when you're old.
Mhm.
So it was a completely shocking thing for us.
You saw a plastic surgeon, is what you mentioned.
Yeah.
How did you feel at that point where it's like, okay, I have to go to a plastic surgeon? Like, as a mom, how did that make you feel, like kind of being misled to the diagnosis of your child? What was
Well,
kind of going on?
I was terrified. And I remember, so I've quite often gone through like the Google rabbit hole of trying to read what would be happening to my kid because no one seemed to know. So I kind of felt like I had to figure it out myself. And so then we're reading up on these different things and different conditions, and just none of it made sense. So every single time I'm like, I feel like other things would be affected if it was this. And I just kept doubting it every single time. And then when they called and they said, like, pretty much, we don't know why you're here, it's arthritis. And it seems so simple to this one person of something that, like, wouldn't have even been on our radar. We were just like almost just frustrated. It was
Yeah.
so hard to try and figure out what was going on with her. And then once somebody gave us just almost a simple but still not simple answer, we were just like, what?
So obviously as a parent, it's a lot to go through. Like your child's going through it and you're going through kind of the same process as well in a different way, kind of like the emotional way. When you realized it was arthritis, did that make you relieved? Were you still kind of stressed? How are you feeling at that point?
It was a bit of both. So I was definitely relieved that we had an answer. But
Yeah.
then from there I was like, I need all of the answers. I need all the resources. I need all the information. I need to know what medications. And pretty quickly we had to switch from steroid medications, which was kind of like the first simple thing that they give you, to methotrexate, which is a pretty scary drug when you're like Googling every single thing at first.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, I was in college and had a little, like, Charlotte's little sister, Riley, at home. So I had little baby. I'm trying to manage college, trying to start my career, and figure out that I'm going to be giving my child what's basically like a low dose chemotherapy drug. It was not great for me.
Yeah, I totally see that. Like, I know even my mom, when she heard that, because we touched prednisone and the steroids, and then we went to methotrexate, and getting to that step to, okay, let's try biologics was like, let me go through the whole internet to see what this is all about.
Yeah, I think it was just a lot of that. Like, it was a lot of these, okay, you're throwing out these big drugs. Like, my daughter was 3 and I was going to have to give her injections myself at home. Like, that's not something that really any parent can like prepares themselves for. And then when you hear that, like, there is side effects and there is risks, and it doesn't sound like it could be like the long-term plan. Well, I'm like, well, like, she's 3, and so if this could be her whole life, what would end up happening to her if we end up on these kinds of drugs for 5, 10, 15 years? Like, we don't know what the future holds for her. Even still, we don't have her disease under control at 8, and she's gone through a whole bunch of other medications since, and it was really scary. So I was trying to find people like us, because you can read all the different things about arthritis medication, but when you're comparing it to like someone in their 40s, 50s, 60s, that doesn't give you the answers of like, what am I going to do with my little 3-year-old who's still developing right now and growing? And is this going to affect her in the long term? So the internet was where I went.
Yeah, I think a lot of the times, like, we're not supposed to approach the internet in these situations. Like, I know physicians don't recommend. At that point, I think as a parent, you're kind of desperate, I'd say.
Yeah.
Like, you're desperate to find an answer. You're desperate to find out what's happening, how this can get better. So, in terms of Googling, because that's something we rely on a lot, what are some other things you kind of searched on the internet for? I'm curious to know.
Well, and like, so there was the side effects of different medications. I was trying to figure out if there was just even anyone like us. Like like the idea of like a kid, no one had ever heard of it. All of our family members were just kind of dumbfounded by the whole thing. Like nobody really could make sense of it and almost was like in disbelief. So, and I grew up, my mom has an autoimmune disorder. And so I grew up knowing kind of like the hospital terms and stuff like that. So I was just in reactive mode. Whereas for everybody else, it was just kind of like, well, no, like, it can't be that. Like, she runs around fine sometimes and things like that. So I'm like, there has to be other people because nobody was really getting it at all. So it was a very isolating and like lonely time at first because like we had to react and we had to be there for her, but then no one else really understood like the monthly doctor's appointments and medications and everything. And then just also watching like constantly like, oh, is she limping down the street as we walk to the park today? Oh no, what's that going to mean? And that fear of trying to figure everything out. And the whole time it was just overwhelming and trying to search out for somebody that was just like us.
Yeah.
So
I understand how that feels. Like, I know a lot of parents go through that as well, and it is tough. And you mentioned how now Charlotte, so she was diagnosed with JIA, but her arthritis changed.
yeah.
So what was that all about?
And it wasn't even that it changed. So Charlotte's the entire time, I think she constantly, our doctor is amazing. And she sits there and constantly is like, she just makes things a little more difficult. So every typical response that you should have to a medication, she doesn't. Every like different thing that should have worked and should have done stuff, it doesn't. And every checkup that like with her joints, they'll go and they'll check, and it should be, you would think that a lot of the times with joints with JIA, like that the knee would hurt and the knee is sore. And so you would think that the knee would swell. Well, for Charlotte, it might not be swollen and it might look great. But in Charlotte's, like Charlotte is telling us, like it hurts and it's not showing any of the stuff that it should. So with that, and with especially her big toe and her ankle, like her feet have always been the biggest challenge and the like most consistent challenge for all of her joints. She's had other joints affected, but not in as severe as her foot and ankle and that big toe. Her doctor searched through everything, and then with the bottom of the feet, so enthesitis related arthritis, the bottom of her feet are always constantly like red and puffy and swollen.
Okay.
And Charlotte runs constantly, like never on a temperature, like on the thermometer, but she is always hot. We refer to her as her little oven, and she's the type of kid that could wear shorts in a snowstorm and be happy. Like she's just always hot. So those hot, beefy feet and a swelling of just like the tendons on the bottom is that was what pushed our doctor to go and say, okay, you know what, this is enthesitis, especially here. That's probably why we're not responding to things as easily, and go everything from there because, I think
sometimes when you look at other children that have this like the same condition, it kind of shows on everyone differently. And like sometimes, like even for me, I don't get fevers, I don't get like the morning stiffness, like that's just not what I get. And it's weird because sometimes I think you question yourself, like, do I actually have arthritis because it doesn't line up with all the symptoms that are supposed to be there?
And exactly, that's what happened with us. Is like, we're like, okay, we already had this miswrong diagnosis-ish thing of that it was going to be something with her veins. And then it's like, oh, is it actually, like, then we were second guessing ourselves, like, well, her knee isn't going like big. Her toe did swell up. Her ankle has swelled up. Like, she has had swelling, but it's her pain is so much more prevalent before the swelling even is showing.
Yeah.
That it doesn't look like it. And then we're like, oh, are we wrong again? What is happening with her? Because we just want to make it so that she gets an answer and gets the treatment and then is good. And it's definitely not been the most linear thing like that. It's been quite the roller coaster with the girl, but yeah.
And sometimes when you like you yourself, you don't know what's happening and you
No.
don't know how to explain things to yourself. And then now it's like telling friends, family, kind of explaining what's going on because they might be thinking certain things the way they see Charlotte. Maybe she's not feeling the best all the time. How did telling friends and family about Charlotte's condition, if that's something that you did, kind of roll out? And were there any positives or negatives throughout that process?
There's definitely been both. Like, so we have such a supportive friends and family, but there's definitely been times where you get all this, you go to a doctor's appointment, and one, especially when she was younger, and trying to balance the little toddler that kind of wants to lie to the doctor. We went through that for a while where she would say nothing hurts because she's a superhero, and then cry and tell us that everything hurt after we left. And we go through those appointments, balance the busy toddler that didn't want to be at the doctor's, find out everything hurt, and then try to go and explain all that to family that was not doubting it, but just wondering, like, why? Because we don't see it. And you'd come out and you were just defeated. Like, there were so many times where I'd sit there and I'm like, I just took in all this information. This is a new medication. This is something I need to look up. Now we got to look up physio and I got to reach out to this person. And then everybody else wanted a repeat of what I just went through that day. And it was like, I remember we would be driving home and I would spend my entire 40-minute drive back from the children's hospital calling the different grandparents and explaining, like, no, this is what's happening. Yep. No, I asked this. No, it's not going to be this. Or then trying to tell friends. And there was no ever wind down time for us to actually process it. And then I'd come home and it'd be like dinner time and it would just be like, you'd be so emotionally drained that you were just done and you couldn't deal anymore. You had poured every single thing out of your cup and then your cup's like just dry. You couldn't do anything else.
I understand how
hard.
Yeah, I definitely understand how that feels, right? And that's a lot to handle. And you've been through that. I think a lot of parents, even my mom, has been through that. So it's definitely like, I think parents are so strong when it comes to being an advocate for their children. Like, I don't know if you've experienced kind of the school life of Charlotte and the accommodations if she needs any. And I definitely want to touch on that because I know my parents were really strong advocates for that and it's a challenge. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about the school aspect as Charlotte is in elementary school. And obviously, like, how did that go? How did you tell the teachers, the peers around her, maybe peers' parents, and accommodations? Because that's a great topic to talk about.
Mm-hmm. Well, and so I've had like almost like a special little situation with the school. So I actually Charlotte, like, we'll go back to Char going into junior kindergarten. So she's getting ready to start school because all the diagnosis and everything happened when she was in daycare. And that was actually, I was working at the same daycare that she was in when she was diagnosed. So everyone kind of was going through the whole process with me, and I never really had to prepare. Then we go to drop off my first child at junior kindergarten, and I went in ready with books. Like, I had printed out every research article about arthritis, everything, because I was like, I've had to explain this to everybody. Like, I'm going to come in with all the information. We had been told that they wanted her to do daily physiotherapy at the school to try and help her joints out so she could be successful in kindergarten and be able to just run around and play like a regular 5-year-old kid. And working, then I was going through school to become an EA, which I am now. And I knew that that was something that they could do, because that was what I was going to be doing at my own school, was working with a student that was going to need daily physiotherapy and everything along that. So I knew, I was like, you have to be able to accommodate these things. Wow. So I came into the school that first week before school happened, pretty much guns a-blazing, like, you cannot say no to my kid. This is what's going to happen. I have all this information. And our daughter's school is so amazing. And they're just like, oh, yeah, that's all right. We already have a student with juvenile arthritis.
Wow.
I was like, what? I've never found a family that had juvenile arthritis. Like, I've been searching for this for years now to try and find someone else who gets it. And turns out that they already had someone. So they were completely accommodating, and they've been amazing. But I've heard so many stories. So every year I sit there and I get ready. And even like this week, we're getting ready to go back to school. And I have letters and templates and things talking about what will happen after her biologic infusions, different symptoms, and what we've had, and the toll on her mental health and emotional health that she's gone through, and how you got to look out for that in the classroom and everything. And I still sit there and I'm ready and ready and ready, but I haven't had to fight yet. We asked for an IEP right away in junior kindergarten, which is like an individual education plan, because I was, again, ready to fight. And I was like, you're not going to take away marks for gym, like for music, anything like that. Like, I know that maybe she might not be able to dance around the classroom. And if you're thinking that that's because she can't, like, I want her to be protected. So things like that. We've now been able to go and get her own Chromebook at the school, because her wrist has been one of almost like the key player joints now that she's actually in school. And she sits there, and now she has a Chromebook and has been learning how to use the technology so that she can go. But there's many people that don't realize that that's something you can fight for, and not even fight, but just ask, because the schools have all these options to accommodate your child for something that they could use and be so beneficial. But because that's my career, I was able to go and say, like, no, she could get these things and qualify for it, because a lot of people don't think, what is it? Well, we got her computer in grade 2, and why would she need a computer in grade 2? They're not doing too much, but it's there and it's ready and things. And then for online learning, it was amazing, because we were able to use it for everything and not have to deal with all of that as well. So it's really great.
Yeah, I have a few questions, because a lot of the information that you mentioned, very important. I mean, I think a lot of parents are not EAs, so they don't know that this is possible, like you mentioned. And I think even for me, it was a struggle, because technology, even as a high school student, was not the most accepted thing. Like, it's not acceptable. It's like, you have to have your handwritten notes. You have to do your homework handwritten. And a lot of people realized during the pandemic, like you mentioned, that how do you know, like, what the child is doing on the screen, right? They could be typing, and it's like, yeah, just because you can't see the way that they're doing work, it's accepted now. That they're allowed to type because every other student can type now, so it's okay, right? And it's really frustrating. I know in high school I did not have the best accommodations. I mean, I did have accommodations, but that's because my parents sat in meetings for at least 2 years. And it was still that the teachers did not believe that I had arthritis. And I'm glad that Charlotte's really able to have really good accommodations. And obviously, it will change throughout, but because you're a parent that knows that this is how it works, IEPs need to be in place and IEPs need to be followed. I think it helps you even more because sometimes, like parents coming in, they don't know if this is acceptable to ask for a Chromebook when there's so many Chromebooks sitting there. That's the thing. Like, I see so many Chromebooks in school just sitting there, not being used. But when someone brings their accessible technology or assistive technology, it's like looking at them weirdly because no one else is using it. So does Charlotte know that she has arthritis?
Yes.
Okay. How did the process to explain that she has arthritis go? Because obviously at 3 years old, I don't think you know what's going on.
Yeah. She never really knew. She just had like an idea of, okay, so I have a big toe. My big toe hurts.
Okay.
My big toe hurts, and now mommy has to give me needles, and I hate that. And then it was like, then, well, why do I have needles? So we've bought different books that there's a lot of different child's books that are written for like what is arthritis and things like that. And we did different, like watch different videos and everything to try and kind of educate her as she's like grown with it. So everything that she has been able to understand, she's pretty much grown with her disease. So for example, like she, when going into kindergarten, she knew she had arthritis. She had no idea what that meant, but she knew I have arthritis. I have to take medicine. Sometimes my ankle hurts and sometimes my knee hurts and sometimes I might not be able to walk. Okay. And that was about the extent of it. And now she sits there and she's like, so what does that mean with my joints? And the other day she asked me, is there a joint in my stomach? My stomach kind of hurts.
Oh my.
No, not a joint in there. Like your stomach, I think, just hurts. But she's constantly trying to grow and learn and figure things out. And now, like, she sat there, and because we are in the hospital now once a month for biologic infusions, she has dove, especially in COVID, into like, tell me everything. How does that medication work and what is it doing and how does the IV work? And she's now her stuffy giraffe. She's been putting IVs in giraffe as well every single time because she wants to be a pro at putting IVs in as well.
Oh wow. Honestly, she might just become the next doctor.
She might.
Yeah. Wow. That's really impressive as an 8-year-old to know what's going on. Like I know at 13, I didn't even know what was happening. Like I knew it was arthritis, especially at that older age. You're still not willing to kind of get into knowing what's going on with your own body. How did you feel when the doctor said that Charlotte needs to have biologic infusions? What was going on in you and your husband's mind? How did you say yes?
So for us, it was actually quite interesting because we had a lot of different medications where we had gone through the methotrexate and upped the dose and upped the dose and upped the dose and still weren't getting the results. So then we added Humira, but we were doing those injections and we thought they were maybe doing something, but then that's when the MRIs and everything were showing that they weren't really. So we, again, weren't getting the results that we wanted. And over again, so we had been kind of bracing ourselves, knowing that biologics was going to be the next step. And my husband and I were very nervous, especially because Charlotte started biologics during COVID. So her infusion started at the hospital when we weren't even leaving our house anyways, which was terrifying. And then the whole emotional process of doing the infusions. So she's there often from noon hour or so until after supper time.
Oh my.
And it's just a big emotional draining day.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's
I can
been a lot.
imagine that. I can imagine that. I was also on biologic infusions. Unfortunately, it did not work. But it was kind of like my parents did a lot of research on biologics because we felt that the information that was given was good, as in like it was informative, but there was a lot of questions for the future and questions about fears and uncertainty and when it's going to work, what are the long-term side effects, and those were things that they did research on on Google, our clearly best friend, um, and that scared them. So we actually had to think about it for a while. And I think sometimes when you think about it for a while, you don't realize the progression of the disease and you don't realize that your joints can get eroded and damaged. And you really don't, right? Because you're in a situation where you need to make a really big decision. And at 13, when I was diagnosed, like this was 15 actually, like I did not know how to make that decision myself. So it was based on what my parents said. If it was me, I would say no, don't want an infusion. I'm okay. Right? And I understand how it's emotionally draining, but also like physically draining. You're sitting there with an IV in your arm for a really long time and you feel really tired. And it's not the best feeling. And especially for me, when it didn't work, it was like I felt like I was doing this for no reason. And it's a very bad feeling. But I'm glad that it's working on Charlotte. Like that's really good. And I'm glad that you've come to that. You mentioned like before that her disease is still very active.
Yes.
So is the medication working, would you say? Or you
We
don't know yet?
think we're definitely starting to get, so Remicade, the biologic infusion that she gets every 4 weeks. So as of right now, we've been getting 3 amazing weeks. We see Charlotte and exactly what she's like. And then we get a week where we're not.
Okay.
And it's like the week leading up to her infusion, we've just known pretty much like now my husband and I, we don't plan anything fun, or well, we try to plan things fun, but not like physically active
Mhm.
because it's like, oh, we could go for like a family hike, which we love to do. But that week we know that Char might not make it through the whole hike because it might just be too much. So we've tried to plan like small fun things because then her mental health, she's realized now because she's very smart 8-year-old that
Mhm.
she sits there and she goes, oh, it's a week until my infusion, everything's going to hurt,
Yeah.
which has been really tough to try and navigate. Is it actually hurting, or have you told yourself that it's just going to hurt because nothing works? Because she's gone through over 10 medications in the last 5 years of her life, that why wouldn't this one not work as well?
Would you be comfortable talking about some of your fears and uncertainties for Charlotte's future?
Yeah, like I've definitely got a bunch. Like we sit there all the time and I have taken on a role through Cassie and Friends where I've been trying to like be our community leader and connect all these families. So I'm now hearing stories from ages 2 all the way to 18 and transitioning, and I hear all the other stories and I'm like, well, how is that going to work for us? Like I said, for going to the school, I get ready for the fight because I've heard of people who have had the teachers that aren't accepting, and
Mhm.
I'm ready and I'm like, okay, like someone's going to give me this challenge and I need to be ready and prepared because once I get that fight, like I have to do it. Or I think about her, like she used to lie to her doctor all the time. Well, eventually she's not going to take me to the doctors with her. So
Mhm.
is she going to care and keep doing her medications? Like I drive her there, so she doesn't have a choice right now. But once she
Mhm.
can, is she going to do it? Is she going to care? Or is she going to be like, this is my entire life? Like I give up.
Yeah.
And things like that. And then just like her mental health in the last, I mean, COVID has not helped at all, but her mental health in the last year, we've seen such a like rise and decline. And it's been very tough, and she's already got so much anxiety, and she's 8 years old.
Yeah.
Like, that's something that no parent can prepare themselves for. And tiptoeing around that once you throw in like hormones and puberty and teenager, and like I work with teenagers, like they've already got enough going on, to already throw in anxiety and like juvenile arthritis and everything as well that she goes through, like just how is she going to handle that? So
That's a lot. It's a lot of uncertainty,
yeah.
fears, and we can probably go on about it for a really long time because you sort of try to question everything, right? And you see other people, and then you're like, okay, well, they can do this. Why can't Charlotte do this? Charlotte has done this. Why can't they do this? And it's like a lot to handle. And I understand how that can not only impact Charlotte's mental health, but your mental health as well. So, how have you and your husband kind of had those conversations? And then also, how do you manage your mental health and his mental health to make sure that you're kind of sane, because it's very hard. I understand that there's a lot to stress about, and you have
Yeah.
other things to stress about, right? You have another daughter.
Yeah.
You have everything. So how does that work?
There's definitely been highs and lows.
Okay.
There was a lot of times too where we would almost go to the doctor's appointments, especially pre-COVID, and we could go together, and we'd sit there and like immediately I'd be like, yes, like we should try this thing, and he might have been a bit more reserved, and then we'd sit there and we're like, oh wait, do we have a different opinion? And then we'd have to figure that out, because like she's our daughter, we have to figure it out together. But you also don't want to, like, if I say, for example, like if I was, yes, let's try this new medication, and he's like, well, like if we're not sure, like let's keep trying this one for a little bit, we're not ready to give up, like you don't want to have that resentment in your marriage or anything like that, or whatever. So you're trying, one of you has to sacrifice and make the other decision. And then just also, so I have been pretty much to every appointment since
Okay.
she was 3. I make sure that it's me. He can handle sitting like at home with Riley while I'm at the appointments. But like for infusions, for example, because of COVID and we can't go together, we often tried to go together. But so she's been on Remicade for over a year now, and he hasn't gone, not because he doesn't want to, but because there's no way that I'm not. It's just like things like that. So I definitely dove all in. And like I was saying before about like pouring from the empty cup, well, I poured all my cup. Like I was everything I could for Charlotte to make sure that she was the most taken care of.
Mhm.
And it got not good at all. I ended up, my mental health declined very severely, and I was very worried and upset, and I actually ended up going to counseling for just thinking in general of like searching out my mental health is bad and I need help. And I didn't realize how much I ended up, it'd be like hour appointments, and I'd spend almost 40 minutes talking about Char's next doctor's appointment.
Oh,
That I didn't even realize that it was affecting me until I actually got talking, and I was like, oh man, like
yeah.
if it's hurting me this much, and trying to figure this out and understanding and talking and making sure everyone is aware what we're going through, like how is that affecting everyone else? Because like there's probably other families that like me was ready, so ready, just always ready to fight and do everything for her, that I never actually took the time for myself to like breathe and process and accept that like I'm parenting a child with a rheumatic disease, and that can be hard.
Yeah.
And now that I've worked through a lot of that, now it's been able to be like, okay, well, how do I help other people realize this now? Because I'm sitting there all the time like, okay, I didn't have any idea what was going on.
Yeah.
And I pushed it into other issues, and it was that.
Wow. I think a lot of the time talking about what's going on really helps. Like, you don't realize till you talk about it. And the certain person you talk to, you don't want to dump everything on one person, obviously. So counseling, therapy, they seem to be good solutions. I mean, everyone I've talked to has said that just talking to someone, like, it's not embarrassing. Like, you just talk to them and about how you feel, and it's like someone just listening to you and sometimes providing you with advice. Sometimes you just get to talk and
Yeah.
let you don't need to hear anything from them. It's just talking. And I know that you've definitely seen some benefits from that. And so, since we're on the topic of counseling support, I've seen you in many Cassie and Friends events. So I am a tag leader at Cassie and Friends, and you've mentioned that you're one of the leaders in London.
So in that first original internet rabbit holes when Charlotte was diagnosed, I think it might have been like 2:00 in the morning one night that I'm just sitting there on my phone in bed, and I found Cassie and Friends, and I was just like, this is exactly what I want. Like, I want people who are actually focused on kids with arthritis, not adults, not seniors, anything like that. And there's families, and oh my gosh, they have family days and all this stuff. So I sent them this email to find out that they were only in BC.
Yeah.
I'm in Ontario. Well, that doesn't work. So a couple years later, like, I had reached out, I had looked at some of their pages, and they've got so many amazing resources on their website. And then they sent me a message and said, hey, we're expanding across the country. So their first initial meeting when they expanded to London about 5 years ago now, they invited me and a couple other families and our doctors, and we all sat down and talked about what Cassie and Friends' future could be for Ontario and for London. And so I've been there since day one of pretty much London. Yeah, I've been promoting it ever since they came, and then recently stepped on as the parent leader for London. And I've been one of the community support. So there's an online support network. And I've been leading that. I help be the admin of one of the Facebook pages that they have been inviting families to, so that I can hopefully connect. And now it's awesome because now I get these emails all the time of families that are just like me on that first initial internet rabbit hole. But now, instead of just hearing like, we're not there yet, or we're only focusing on seniors, or we've never heard of juvenile arthritis, I can sit there and be like, yes, and this is what I did, and this is what this might look like, and this is what this joint injection might look like, or anything like that, and give those people the thing that I didn't get 5 years ago when she was diagnosed. And it's been amazing. So yes, I have dove into the social media a lot because you can just find so many more connections. And that's the biggest thing. I think if we had those connections, and Charlotte has made friends through Cassie and Friends as well. And so she sees kids that are like her and loves to go. And she's also just been getting just as much involved. You guys are going to have another youth leader, I'm sure, once she's old enough to be there. But it's just given us so much community. And that's something that we've been looking for a long time.
I'd love to just end off with some pieces of advice and some tips that you would give, because you've mentioned a lot today and we had a really good discussion, but I'd love to hear more. So in terms of, I know you mentioned some alternatives, like how you plan a hike, but you realize Charlotte can't do it. What are some alternative activities that as a parent you can organize for your kids when they are feeling some joint pain? And you can relate it specifically to Charlotte and her condition and her joints, but what are some alternative activities or things that you plan to accommodate Charlotte?
So a big thing for us has always been that, like, if she physically can't do a big thing, it doesn't have to be a big thing. So she wants to go for a bike ride. Well, then instead of going for a big family bike ride, we will drive to a spot and go for that like 1 kilometer bike ride. and things like that, and showing her to meet her limits. Or like if she really wanted to go for a hike but she feels better in the pool, then throw out swimming or something like that that she can physically handle a lot better. And if not, having those like still family times, like we play a lot of board games.
Okay.
So, and that's something that wouldn't be hard on her joints, but she's still having fun. And it shouldn't just have to be like, I'm sore, I can't do anything. Like, I'm going to sit in front of the TV and do nothing because this sucks and I'm sore. Because I think that mentally, then you're not able to look past it. So still finding a way to like meet part way of what she wants to do, but feels like she can't, so that she knows that she still can. And then making sure that you make time that once you are feeling good, that let's go do that big thing now that you're feeling great.
Yeah. And that totally makes sense. I feel like as a child, you feel like when you're able to do things with everyone else, you feel so much better, because then you're not sitting in your bed crying and thinking that you can't do anything, but you can still do something. And so even doing those small things can still make you happy, is what I'd say. Thank you so much, Marissa, for coming on today. We talked about so many different topics, like managing your child's condition, fears, parenting, mental health, involvement with Cassie and friends, and so much more. And I'm glad that we had a really good discussion on so many of these topics, because I think a lot of the time parents are looking for other parents who are talking about these topics, and it just makes it more relatable to them, and they're able to actually make decisions because they hear other parents and their stories. So I'm really happy to have you on. And everyone, like, comment, and subscribe. Check out the Cassie and Friends of London page, Cassie and Friends in general, Marissa's social media accounts. I'll link them all down below, and I'll see everyone next week on Take a Pain Check. Thank you. Bye.
I can't hide, 'cause growing pains are keeping me up and